Hello, this is Deirdre, Benjamin, and Kristen representing the firm Tsunami from the industry Apricot. We will be detailing Tsunami and its brand's performance this past semester, as well as our experience working with the MarkStrat simulation. Next slide. Overall firm performance. Here we have a comparison of Tsunami in period 1 starting in 5th position versus our end position, last place in period 8. Tsunami started off strong with a lot of growth and promise, even moving all the way up to 4th position in period 2, maintaining that for periods 3 and 4, before slipping back into 4th position in periods 5 through 7, and finally landing in 6th or last place for the final period, period 8. You can see by our final SPI, revenue, net contribution, and cumulative net contribution that our resulting numbers were not ideal in comparison to standards set by our competitors. Next slide. Here is our company profit and loss statement, again to further illustrate our gradual demise, specifically within the last 4 periods. In period 6, we took a big hit but seemed to bounce back for period 7 due to the brand changes that we were implementing in the last few periods. Overall, you can see how our revenue decreased significantly from almost $64 million to $34 million. Next slide. Brand performance. Tsunami had 4 brands total, 2 original by the name of Tone and Tops, and 2 newer by the names of Toll and Torn. Tone initially started off strong with 25.6% market share and an ideal awareness of 74% among professionals. We went after professionals and high earners, which was detrimental to the brand's success. We ended up pulling this brand from our firm in period 7 because it was losing so much revenue. Tops targeted explorers and did fairly well. In period 4, one of its best periods, brand awareness was 84% for explorers, purchase intentions were 70.8% for explorers, and market share was 71.7%, earning the top spot for explorers across the board. Tops was the 3rd most selling brand by volume at 180,000 units sold for that period. Tops was in 3rd place for top selling brands at $65 million. By period 8, Tops dropped into 9th place, making the top 10 brands, which is admirable. Of our 3 brands, Tops performed the best, bringing in $12 million in revenue. Next slide. Toll and Torn are 2 newer Tsunami brands that were introduced in period 7. These brands fared okay for the last 2 periods, but not as great as we anticipated. Toll and Torn ranked in 11th and 12th place, respectively, in the final period 8, just short of the top 10 margin. We decided to focus on one consumer segment each for these 2 brands. Toll targeted shoppers and Torn targeted savers. By period 8, both brands generated $11 million in revenue each. Next slide. Performance in each segment. Here is a breakdown of our brands' performances in each consumer segment based on data from period 7. First, we have brand awareness by consumer segment. It is interesting to note here that of our brands, Tops was on target with 76% for explorers as a targeted segment. Tone 2, though performed poorly, had close to ideal numbers for awareness, with 76% for professionals and 66% for high earners. Torn and Toll had small percentages of their targeted segments, possibly because they were introduced so late in the simulation. Second, we have purchase intentions here by consumer segment also. Note that Tops has the highest purchase intentions of all Tsunami brands, with 43% rate for explorers. Next slide.
There were several lessons that we learned based on our marketing decisions. The first is that marketing one product to multiple segments does not work. This can be illustrated by our 2 original brands, Tone and Tops. For Tone, we decided to pursue both high earners and professionals because they had purchase intentions of 39% and 17% respectively in period 0. However, by period 7, the high earner segment was led exclusively by the brand Nova, which had a market share of 67.7%. The average market share of all other 4 segments for Nova was only 0.45%. It is clear that Nova was developed and marketed specifically to high earners and no other segment. The same can be said for professionals. By period 7, the market share of professionals was led by rock, soul, and more. Each of these brands captured roughly 25% of the market. The average market share of all other segments was only 1.1%. In period 7, our brand Tone had a market share of 1.0% for professionals and 1.9% for high earners. If we had originally targeted just one segment for Tone, we could have competed with the other brands that ultimately pushed Tone out of the market. The opposite can be said of Tops. We originally decided to target only Explorers for this brand, and it ended up being our most successful product. We established market share in the Explorer segment early and surged to an 80.7 market share in period 6. The average market share we enjoyed from period 0 through period 7 was 49.7%, just under half of the entire segment. This was possible because we tailored this product to appeal exclusively to Explorers. We also learned that it is very risky to take out a loan. In period 3, it was decided that the company should take out a loan to fund new R&D projects. These projects aim to alter Tone and Tops to better fit the wants of their targeted segments. While the Explorers liked the changes to the Tops brand and market share surged, the opposite occurred for Tone. The mixed characteristics meant to appeal to both high earners and professionals appealed to neither. Market share plummeted for Tone, as did our earnings before taxes. In period 3, our earnings before taxes were $26 million, a record high for the company. After period 3, the final 5 periods averaged only $6.8 million in earnings per period. We were stuck paying back the loan, which cut into our subpar earnings and ultimately caused our stock price to fall. Finally, we learned that introducing products too late is ill-advised. By period 6, Tone was losing money and Tops was unable to increase its earnings because of the shrinking market share of Explorers. We decided to introduce 2 products, Toll and Torn, to target shoppers and savers respectively. These were the largest segments, and we wanted to rejuvenate the company by capturing some of the market. However, the new products did not hit the shelves until period 7, which was by far the latest for any new product to be introduced. The latest other companies introduced new brands was in period 5. The leading brands in the shoppers and savers segments had already been established by the time Torn and Toll hit the shelves. Our new products were unable to gain much traction in such a short period of time. If we had introduced them earlier, we would stand a better chance to cut into the market share of shoppers and savers and increase our profits.
We began our period 0 with 2 brands, Tone and Tops, and they specifically marketed to high earners and professionals for Tone, so 50-50 for that particular brand, and for Tops we targeted 100% Explorers. And we did so majority of the rounds. It was the last round that we decided to change things up. We had Tone was decreasing in market share significantly, and we noticed that their segment was losing interest. So we decided to drop that brand, and we decided to keep Tops, which was a brand that had fared fairly well for us throughout the periods. And then we also decided to introduce Toll and Torn, which targeted specifically shoppers and savers. And the reason that we did that was because the shoppers and savers segments, they each represent 39% of the total market, which is a significant share of the market as opposed to the Explorers and high earners, as well as the professionals, which was around 10% or less of the market each. One of the things that we learned from that was obviously we had begun building those brands towards the end of the simulation, and we needed to introduce them much earlier in the process. And if we had done so, we would have been able to gain market share and build brand awareness to continue on to gain greater market dominance at that point. Next slide. If we take a look at the products, we have Legend versus Tsunami. And the reason we chose to specifically look at Legend is because it's the top brand in the entire market. What they did particularly well is they had 2 brands which had the most retail sales, which was Loaded and Looker, and they made sure that they had really great features for their products. So that included features, design, battery, display, power, price. And also when you take a look at the base cost and the percentage of that price, they made sure to price things well. We introduced Toll and Torn in period 7. They introduced theirs in period 3. So when we launched our R&D projects, the best thing for us to have done would have been to introduce them early to be able to build them, to build brand awareness and to capitalize on some of the product features. So that's a lesson that we learned there, and Legend is a really good firm to look at to see what they did well. Next slide. When we take a look at price, Legend did particularly well in the pricing category, and they had a really good balance of having a great product, and they were able to command a higher price. If you take a look at the prices that we have, for Toll it was $299, Tops $365, Torn $220. At the point when we had introduced the 2 new brands later in the game, we were looking for savers and segment the savers market and the shoppers market to be able to jump on board and to be interested in buying those products. The prices that we had for them were fairly low, hoping to gain attention. However, we already had strong competitors in the market, so the purchase intentions were really highly favored to those particular brands. Also, Tops had a price of $365, and if you take a look at Legend, their top price is $449. So they were able to command a higher price for the amount of the base cost that was going out in production. And they were able to significantly gain market share as a result. Next slide.
Place. Place refers to channels, coverage, assortments, locations, inventory, and transport. In period 1, we learned the hard way that it is important to have representation and distribution coverage in each consumer channel, such as specialty stores, mass merchandisers, and online stores. We allocated our commercial sales team here to just specialty stores, missing out on potential sales from mass merchandisers and online stores. You can see from the table that we were the only firm at this point to miss out on these potential sales opportunities, with 0% and 0% in both mass merchandisers and online stores. Next slide.
For promotion, one big lesson learned was that higher advertising and brand awareness does not always equate to better performance. Take these 2 charts as an example. Here we have listed the top 4 brands by brand awareness for professionals in period 6. Our brand, Tone, had the second highest brand awareness of any product. You will see that even though our advertising efforts to increase brand awareness worked, our performance was dismal. The other 3 products with high brand awareness held extremely high purchase intentions as well as market share. Tone, however, could not duplicate their success. In period 6, Tone held only 1.7% of the market share for professionals, despite being so well known. The poor performance of Tone seems to be caused by the perception of our product by the professionals. In the second chart, you will see the ideal specs for professionals in period 6 based on the multi-dimensional scaling report we ordered. Also listed is the perception of each dimension by the professionals. The most glaring difference of all the brands comes from the convenience factor of Tone. The professionals had a choice of several products, and they were able to choose those that fit their exact needs. Since Tone only met roughly 2 out of their 3 wants, they were able to turn to other products easily. While we tried to advertise and change the perception of Tone to better fit the ideal dimensions of professionals, we were unable to do so because the reality of our product was so well known.